Hello, this is Mr. Liu, and I will be reviewing your Economics 1010 through the Senseilue Study Guide for Economics 1010. I promise that if you review this exam, use the study guide, that you will do fine on your final. First thing that you'll need to know about is aggregate demand. The aggregate demand is the same as total demand. It is also the same as GDP, or gross domestic product. It is the equivalent of consumer spending, investment spending, government spending, plus exports minus imports. If anything on the right side of the equation were to change, such as if investment spending were to decline, then the left side of the equation, aggregate demand, would also decline. Or if government spending were to decline, consumer spending were to decline, total demand would decline.
If any input to GDP were to decline, what would happen to aggregate demand?
As we mentioned, aggregate demand would decline. Next thing we'll cover is unemployment. What counts as unemployment? Well, two things that you should probably remember. Number one, in order to be counted in unemployment statistics, one must be at least 16 years or older. The other behavior, in order to be counted as unemployed, you must be actively seeking employment.
Who is counted as unemployed?
Well, we know 16 years and older plus actively seeking employment. Huh? What is a public good? Well, perhaps the most important thing you need to know is that a public good must be made available to the general public regardless of one's ability to pay.
Public goods cannot be denied to anyone who does not pay. Which of the following is not a public good?
Well, we know national defense is a public good, as well as police, clean air, and seatbelt law, or the rule of law. The only thing on this list that is not a public good would be a movie ticket. Why do we use advertising? Well, there are several reasons that we use advertising. Primarily, though, we want to persuade people to buy our products, to increase demand for our products. Let's watch a short video. Well, that was pretty short. Okay.
Advertising is everywhere. In what you read, what you watch, what you eat, what you wear. They're in the sky, they're on the ground, they're in the water. Our economy thrives on you buying more and more and more, even though you don't need any more. And, oh yeah, you're in debt. The goal of advertising is simple. Get you to buy a product. To make you say, yes, I want this, I need this, my life will be better with this retro cowbell dispenser, but a mason jar too. That is adorable. This is the mug that won't fall over. Watch this. It fell. We wanted to learn how advertisers capture our attention and get us to buy stuff we don't even really need. So we turned to Jonas Sachs, an advertising executive and co-founder of Free Range Studios, to explain a few ways brands get into our heads. How do ads tell us who we are, or tell us who we should be?
We see 3,500 of them a day. And the majority of them basically tell us you suck, and if you don't buy this product, you're not going to be rich enough, smart enough, hot enough. And so we walk around being told 3,500 times a day how deficient and lame we are.
Are there any ads that have stuck out in your mind?
The number one most shared advertisement on YouTube of all time is that Dove Real Beauty Sketches ad. They make the Real Beauty Sketches. It's all about how women are so much more beautiful than they think they are through this stunt with a police artist who's sketching them.
Tell me about your hair.
They make a picture of what they think they look like versus what a stranger thinks.
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
People are saying, listen, they're reaching hundreds of millions of people with a positive message about beauty. People want to share it because they say, oh, those are my values, that's my idea. And then you start buying the soap because you share those values. So this is one of those classic shop therapy ads. That, parenthood is hard, drinking Coke is easy. You need to speak to people on the level of identity, you need to speak to people on the level of emotion. There are millions of people who are going to sit there and be like, yeah, that's my truth, that's it, it's totally me. Thanks, Coke.
Why use Beckham?
Advertisements tell you not that this product does this thing, it's that people like this use this product. If you want to be like these kind of people, use this product and you're instantly one of them. So, we all want heroes in our lives and we want to know how to be more like those heroes. And, watching sports and watching movies that these guys are in, we don't necessarily know how to be more like them, but advertisements tell.
Let's take a look at the law of diminishing returns. First of all, let's take a look at the definition that has been provided by Investopedia. What is the law of diminishing returns? It is the law of diminishing returns as a theory in economics that predicts that after some optimal level of capacity is reached, adding an additional factor of production will actually result in smaller increases in output. Okay? Knowing a little bit about this, let's take a look now. So we close this window off. Okay.
Consider the law of diminishing returns. What does it mean to increase at a decreasing rate?
Well, once optimal is reached, you will see an increase in the decrease of marginal returns. Thus, they're diminishing marginal returns. Okay, look at comparative advantage. What is comparative advantage? Once again, let's take a look at what Wikipedia or Investopedia says. It says it is a comparative advantage is in an economy the ability to produce a particular good or service at a lower opportunity cost. So when we're talking about comparative advantage, we're also talking about opportunity costs. And you'll discover that there are nations that have a lower opportunity cost in producing certain goods and services. Thus, that's why we use foreign countries to produce our electronics. We could do them ourselves, but we choose to import those. And we focus ourselves on other things where we have a comparative advantage. Let's take a look at this. This is a virtual reality shot, and as you can see, a little bit of interesting farming here. This is terrace farming, and these are rice fields. And this happens to be in China, and where you see essentially what is a comparative advantage of a country to produce a certain product. Okay? So the question is, if a country can produce more rice than others at a lower opportunity cost, then it has what is known as a comparative advantage. This is a Khan Academy video about the production function. Essentially, when we're looking at a production function, it is a certain output is the result of certain input. So let's take a brief look at this. All right.
What are the inputs that determine the production function?
Well, the simple answer is the inputs that determine the production function are the four factors of production. They include land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Know-how. In this part of the assignment, you need to use the flip grid to record a short, I believe, a definition of trade-offs. Trade-offs have to do with your opportunity costs and comparative advantage and so forth. This has to do with the production possibility curve. We often talk about guns and butter. We can produce one or the other, but we have the capacity to only produce a certain amount. And so we have to kind of look at our trade-offs. Here's another video by the Khan Academy, and this has to do with zero profit at equilibrium. Let's take a quick look.
In this video, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the notion of perfectly competitive markets. So we're going to think about under what scenarios a firm would make an economic profit or an economic loss in them. Now, as a reminder, these perfectly competitive markets are something of a theoretical ideal. There's few markets in the real world that are truly perfectly competitive. Some might get close, but most markets are someplace in a spectrum between perfectly competitive and at the other extreme, say something like a monopoly. But here we're talking about perfect competition and perfect economic
Zoom towards the end.
loss. Now, one thing to think about is, why would any firm be in this situation? Well, it's important to think about things in the short run versus the long run. In the short run, we've talked about this analysis right over here, where a firm can decide what quantity it would produce that is rational. Its fixed costs are fixed in the short run. We've studied that in multiple videos. But in the long run, its fixed costs aren't fixed. And so the firm can decide to enter or exit the market. And so for firm C, while they've already put in those fixed costs, it is actually rational for them to do it because they're actually able to make the marginal revenue they get up to that quantity. It's at least they're able to more than cover their marginal costs, and then they're able to eat up, or I guess you could say take care of some of their fixed costs. But but they're still not able to run an economic profit. So in the long run, it wouldn't be rational for this firm to stay in the market. They would likely exit the market.
So zero profit at equilibrium is actually this particular chart right here, because if this is equilibrium, this is zero profit. This is where in perfect competition, this is where the lowest point is on the average total cost curve and the marginal cost curve intersect. That would be your zero profit at equilibrium. So the question is, explain what it means if the equilibrium price is 30 and the quantity is 15 units. Well, this is where the supply and the demand curve intersect. Okay. Supply and demand are equal. This is known as the market clearing price. In this example, $30 and 15 units. In macroeconomics, there are three key performance metrics. The three are GDP, or gross domestic product. Number 2 is unemployment rate. And 3 is the inflation rate. Those are the three key measurements by which economists look at the health of an economy. What are the measurements of economic growth? You can learn a little bit more about that. Let's go ahead and close down that way.
Hello everyone, my name is Iris France. 我叫连婉如. Today we're going to talk about nominal income and real income. So nominal income is your income in terms of money. How many dollars can you bring home? But real income is your income in terms of purchasing power, meaning how much goods and services can you afford to buy with your income. Now we're going to use a very simple example to explain. Supposing year 1 your salary is $100,000 and the price of a basket is $100. That means with your salary you can afford to buy 1,000 of such baskets, because $100,000 divided by the price tag 100 will give you 1,000 baskets. Now in year 2, suppose you have a salary increase. Now your salary is $110,000. And at the same time, the price...
Okay, let's go ahead and close the screen. Go to the next slide. Okay, nominal income versus real income. If you receive a pay increase of 8%, that's a pay increase, and inflation is 10%. Your nominal income, okay, the amount of money that you bring home, the total amount of your raise is an increase. Okay? So your nominal income has increased. And your real income, based on what your ability to buy, your total capacity to buy a basket of goods, because of inflation, your real income is actually... What are the three functions? The three are, 1, it is a medium of exchange. Okay? 2, it is a store of value. And 3, it is a medium of account, or medium of account. Okay? So it is a way to determine prices. Those are the three. And what is the purpose of a debit card? A debit card is a type of medium of exchange. It has purpose to help facilitate exchange. And so the thing is, though, you have to understand a debit card is not exactly the same as currency. Okay? So the three functions of money or currency is a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a medium of an account. Or medium of account. Open-ended question. Okay. Give 3 examples of monetary policy. Well, one could be buying and selling government securities. Okay. 2 could be raising or lowering reserve requirements. And 3, raising or lowering interest rates. Each of these 3 would either increase or decrease the amount of money supply in the economy. What is a fiscal stimulus? Well, fiscal stimulus is either additional government spending, transfers, or consumer tax cuts, and they're designed to increase aggregate demand and make up any aggregate demand shortfall that causes an economy to perform below its potential. So, question? What is a fiscal stimulus? It is an attempt by the government to stimulate the economy through tax and spending initiatives. Okay. List at least 3 things that may influence the price elasticity of demand. Well, 3 things that may, remember the difference between price elasticity versus inelasticity is with price elasticity, demand changes based on increases and decreases in prices. If something is inelastic, demand does not change. We take the example of if you're diabetic and you need insulin, you're most likely to pay whatever the going cost is for that because it is necessary for life. But 3 things that can influence price elasticity. Obviously, we look at either an increase or decrease in pricing. We can see maybe a substitute good. So if a substitute good is created because of new technology, we can see price elasticity occur there. And then the third or one-third, another option could be if you see some other externality, such as population changes and so forth, that can change the elasticity of demand. What are some of the characteristics of a perfectly competitive market? Many firms selling essentially the same product. No differentiation. Okay? In a perfectly competitive market, sellers are price takers. Okay? Another question. Listen to the podcast by the St. Louis Reserve so we can listen to the podcast.
The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis presents The Economic Lowdown. Episode 11.
What does relaxing the Fed Reserve requirements do for banks? It increases the amount of money available to loan to consumers. Okay. We lower the requirement, say for example, from 10% to 5%, means more money is now available to loan. Illustrate the difference between movement along the curve, or ceteris paribus, and a shift in the curve. So movement along the curve is simply because of a price change, right? We know that there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Lower prices increases the quantity demanded. So that's movement along the curve. In the case of supply, we know that when suppliers are paid more, they're willing to produce more. Now, an externality is something that is out of your control. It's an externality that affects supply or demand, and this is a literal shift in supply or demand. So an example could be if we had seen a new technology introduce, maybe electric vehicles, and so we see a shift in demand for gas-powered vehicles. What would happen to demand for tacos if the price of tacos were to double? Well, that's an easy one, right? Because if we know the price of a good doubles or increases, demand will go down. Okay? We have one large pizza to divide between two adults, one teenager and one child under 10. How would you allocate the relative scarce amount of pizza? Okay? This is what economics is all about, folks. Economics is about the allocation of scarce resources. So this is just a poll. I might allocate by age. But that's random. There's no set answer. It simply demonstrates the science behind or the social science behind economics.
An idea that will keep coming up as you study economics is the idea of the 4 factors of production, which are usually listed as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And the idea here is if you want to produce anything, entrepreneurship, they're talking about the know-how of putting together the other factors of production in order to produce that output.
Okay, so here we hit a multiple choice question. Which factors of production influence production limits? And you can't answer all that apply. So land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, technical know-how. Which factors of production influence production limits? Well, they all would, wouldn't they? Land would, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, or technical know-how. Let's see what happens here. Okay.
Finally, I want to leave on one idea. The idea of the 2 types of things that could be produced from all.
What is a monopoly? Well, let's talk about more about monopoly pricing. In a monopoly market, a firm will maximize its total profit by equating marginal costs to marginal revenue and solving for the price of one product and the quantity it must produce. A monopoly will earn a larger profit than a comparable competitive market by charging a higher price and producing lower output. So in this question here, it says a monopoly will earn a larger profit than a comparable competitive market by charging a higher price and producing less output. Let's talk about the money supply. As you can see, this gives us a nice simple overview of the money supply, M1 and M3. Let's go ahead and close this window here. Go to the next slide. And your question is,
With regard to the money supply, specifically M1, what is the difference between money in your checking account and money in your wallet?
well, as far as M1 is concerned, they're both liquid, meaning that cash in your wallet, of course, is liquid. It is cash, and money in your checking account is very liquid because you simply could go in an ATM and get your cash. So, what is the difference? Nothing. So this question here, it says economic growth happens as a result of an increase in economic inputs. When growth occurs, the production possibility curve frontier expands outward to the right from points A1, from A to A1 and B to B1. Described economic growth using the concept of guns and butter. Well, we are growth can occur with improvements in technology. If capacity increases, this changes the production possibility curve. That's essentially it. We have more options. More capacity, more options. Okay. Quiz. It says international trade allows countries to consume more than they could otherwise produce on their own. What is one disadvantage of international trade? Well, we can become over-reliant on a foreign power. So that's a disadvantage. Another question? There are 4 market structures. Explain why perfect competition is the most competitive market structure and why a monopoly is the least competitive. Okay. Pretty simple. Perfect competition is many firms selling the same product or service at a low price. They are price takers. In a monopoly, there is one firm selling a product or service. They own the market and establish price based on market demand. Okay, basically the answer is in perfect competition. It's more competitive simply because we have many firms driving prices lower, essentially becoming price takers. Calculating productivity and efficiency in the workplace. You can read this. And you can see total output divided by the total input is equal to labor productivity. So in a simple example, we can take the labor hours and the amount of time worked times 100, and we get an efficiency